Max, thank you for coming up.
You're welcome.
Can you, and I want you to tell us as much as you're comfortable with, no more than you're comfortable with. Can you give us, and you don't even have to name your child by name if you'd prefer. Would you like to tell us just a little something about your child?
Well, he's 5 years old now. He's nonverbal. He's about, I guess we're figuring somewhere in about the middle of the scale, but he's had a sleep disorder since birth. At worst, we were suffering through him sleeping about half an hour every 2 days, and maybe crashing for about 4 to 6 hours about once a week. And then now he's actually being sedated with quetiapine because he's been proven to be melatonin resistant. So I have to give him enough melatonin and knock out a bull elephant to put him to sleep. It's not fun. That's he's a little bit of a handful, but he's plenty fun.
Okay. And did you fill this out based on his behavior on the quetiapine or
Yes.
before? Okay.
What we've been dealing with
Okay.
for the past 2 years.
Okay, great. And I'm curious, when he falls asleep,
Yeah.
how early, like what time do you give him the quetiapine?
Well, we've adjusted it to about 7 o'clock, 6:30, 7 o'clock. We give it
Okay.
to him. He generally falls asleep before 9.
Okay.
Generally.
Okay.
Every day is different.
Okay. And when he falls asleep, does he fall asleep on his own, or do you kind of see him just
He has to settle
knocking
into,
out?
he's sort of developed his own routine. He doesn't fall asleep in his bed. He falls asleep in the living room. You're generally watching TV with like Thomas the Train or something quiet and musical on. And then once he's out, I can carry him up to his bed, and he'll wake up on the trip up and then settles in on his bed. It's about what we have gotten down to, because if we try to put him up to bed in his bedroom, then it just escalates through the roof, and we have neighbors who need sleep.
Right. So he does best when he's falling asleep on the couch,
Falls
watching.
asleep, yeah, in the big couch, watching television when he's near us. He has to be near everybody else.
So he has to be near you, and the television has to be on.
The television doesn't have to be on, but it's helpful.
It's helpful. And then he'll fall asleep. You'll transport him upstairs.
Yep.
And
he wakes up on the trip and then goes back to sleep, cuddles in, goes back to sleep.
Okay. So looking at the questionnaire, what I'm focusing on are your yeses responses and whether something's a problem. And I realize when we photocopied this,
a little chopped off.
it got a little choppy, but that's okay. You figured it out, and you put your own headings at the top, so that was great. So some of the problems are the child goes to bed at the same time every night being a problem, the falling asleep within 20 minutes, which, by the way, I wished you, the one pet peeve I have with this is the 20 minutes. And again, it was written for typically developing children, but it always seems like 20 minutes does not seem like a big problem. It's usually a lot more for people than 20 minutes. But you said he has trouble falling asleep within 20 minutes after going to sleep, falls asleep alone in his own bed is a problem, struggles at bedtime. So is that with the medicine that he struggles at bedtime?
Oh, yes.
Even with the medicine? Okay.
Even with the medicine, yeah.
Even with the medicine, he's struggling at bedtime?
He resists going to sleep.
Yes. And that's in that 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. window that's
at
happening?
Any time, yeah.
At any
We've had
time.
him be up till midnight.
And then sleeping too little is a problem. Being restless and moving around in his sleep is a problem. Sleeping away from home. And then he awakens during the night, screaming and sweating and inconsolable.
We've had night terror incidences where he doesn't even seem to recognize that we're there. So it's very strange.
So it sounds like in addition to the difficulty falling asleep, there's these episodes where he's waking up, screaming, sweating, inconsolable. And
then incidences where he's just waking up, period, and playing by
Right.
himself or crying because he's alone.
And they're kind of two different episodes,
very
it
different.
sounds like.
You can tell them immediately upon going to check on them that you can tell the difference.
Does one occur at a certain time and another occur at a different time, or could they occur at any time?
Generally, the night terrors tend to happen closer to around midnight, and that's generally even when he just wakes up and cries a little and then goes back to sleep. It's about that same time.
Okay, so they're both occurring at similar times.
Yeah, but when he's just waking up and not being, like he's actually fully waking up, it's generally occurs closer to around 3 or 4 in the morning.
Okay, so that, based on what we learned this morning, that would fit, right?
Yeah.
That the night terrors or sleep terrors are more in the
Earlier
first part
on,
of the night. Okay, and those are the ones where he's inconsolable. And then awakening more than once during the night or once during the night are both problems. And then waking up in a negative mood in the morning is a problem as well.
Yeah, can be.
Okay. And falling asleep riding in a car can be an issue as well. Okay. So this is really helpful because what this is doing for me is I'm not only taking a history, I'm able to look at this as we take the history and focus in on certain areas and domains such as falling asleep, staying asleep, this whole idea of is there something unusual with these night wakings. I was able to review some of the questions about snoring, and I didn't see where that was a problem. I didn't see where grinding teeth was a problem. It seems to me like the biggest challenges right now are he needs the medicine.
Yeah.
And even with the medicine, he's not falling asleep in his bed. When you transport him to his bed, he wakes up and then goes back to sleep. And then he's waking up in the middle of the night, sometimes due to a possible night terror, maybe, but also has these separate awakenings that aren't. And that must be really disruptive to your family and really hard on your family.
Yeah, it can be.
Yeah. Is it every night that the night wakings are happening?
I think just about every night he at least wakes up and makes one little cry that we hear, but then goes back to sleep. He doesn't have like the night terrors every night.
Okay.
But, yeah, he seems to wake up at least once every night.
Right. And at 3 a.m. when he has that second type, 3 or 4 a.m., do you interact with him at all? Or?
No, we try not to. We try to get some sleep while he's playing and happy.
Okay. Okay. And then does he fall back to sleep on his own?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Okay. And if he doesn't, do you then go in or?
No, at that point he's up for the day.
He's up for the day.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is somebody who seems to be able to function perfectly normally on half an hour of sleep in a night.
Okay. So it's kind of luck of the draw if he's going to sleep or wake up, and if he does wake up, whether he's going to go back to sleep on his own or whether, okay. All righty. Okay. So the way I would approach this at this point in my clinic is I would, first of all, I'm really interested in this night terror, sleep terror issue, and I would ask some more questions and try to clarify. I would ask if you could possibly bring in a home video the next time. I would probably dig a little deeper, even though the snoring wasn't noticed here as a problem. I would ask specific questions about snoring, about noisy breathing. I would ask about family history of sleep apnea because I want to be absolutely sure. So let me just do a little bit of that and we'll see. So in terms of these events at night, the 11 p.m. ones, the night, we're calling them sleep terrors or night terrors, do you think your son does the same thing in each event, or are they slightly different? Or, in other words, do you hear him cry out in them? And
yeah, he generally makes a small cry at least. Usually it's one cry, maybe two, and then he goes back to sleep, or he'll go into the full out screaming, bloody terror, night terror thing like you showed in your video there.
Right. Right. And when you interact with him, can you console him? Can you get him to calm down?
No, if he's having one of those episodes, we'll spend usually up to 15 minutes trying to comfort him, and then he just kind of stops on his own and goes back to sleep. And he doesn't act like we've touched him or picked him up or anything, even if we've been picking him up and holding him the whole time.
And are his eyes open or closed
yeah.
in them? They're wide open, okay.
They're wide open, but he looks through us.
He looks through you.
Doesn't see us.
Does he move an arm or hold a hand out in any particular way?
Not particularly,
Okay.
no. But if I pick him up, he will put his arm around me in like a death hold, but he will put his arm around me.
Okay.
But he's not, it seems to be more the contact that he's reacting to than actually knowing I'm there.
Okay. And does he ever shake or tense up or have any jerky movements?
A little bit of shaking, like a reaction.
Shivery type of a shake, but nothing
all tensed up.
rhythmic or jerking. Okay, good. Is there anybody in the family who has seizures?
I have had seizure-like things, but I was tested and I don't have seizures.
Okay. Is there anyone in the family who has snoring or?
Oh, some of my family's infamous for it.
Do you snore?
Not particularly terribly, but apparently a little.
A little, okay. Does your son ever have snoring or noisy breathing or?
He can breathe a little loudly, but not terribly noticeably. It's just deep breathing.
Just deep breathing, okay. Okay. Does your son ever kick his legs in his sleep?
Yes,
or
sometimes he does do that.
Okay.
I've learned that the hard way.
And has he ever had an iron level, a ferritin level checked?
That's a good question. Has he?
He's had his iron checked.
He has?
Not the ferritin,
No, okay.
But not the ferritin, okay. And do you know if it was normal?
I think it, yeah,
Okay,
it
the
all
iron
came back
level is
normal.
normal. Okay, but not the ferritin checked. Okay, and then anything else he does in his, so the night terror, what we're calling the night terrors is once a week, or it can be more frequently than that?
It can be more frequently than that. Like I said, he makes that little cry, then goes back to sleep. He does that almost every night. It's like 5 nights a week at least.
Okay.
But the night terrors itself, where it's the full-on episode, is maybe one every 3 or 4 months usually.
Okay, good. Okay, so it's one every 3 to 4 months. So in this particular guy, what I would say is, because it's happening one every 3 to 4 months, the chances of getting anything on a sleep study are going to be pretty slim. But there still may be some merit in investigating with a sleep study. I'm kind of on the fence. I'm probably thinking I wouldn't necessarily jump into it at this point because I'm not hearing a strong history of snoring. I'm hearing you snore a little bit. I'm not necessarily hearing that we have restless legs, although it might be a good idea to check the serum ferritin level the next time he needs his blood drawn for something. I'm not hearing anything concerning in the spells themselves. I'm not hearing jerking, rhythmic activity. Do you have safety precautions where you'll know if he gets up?
We have a gate across his gate so he can't wander the house and get into things.
My approach would probably be, in this particular guy, to try to implement some behavioral sleep strategies to help the night wakings at 3 a.m., you know, those that are really happening much more frequently than once every 4 months, and then also work on some strategies to help him fall asleep. And those would include, we haven't gotten to the strategies for the night wakings at 3 a.m. yet. We're going to do that after the break. But in terms of the falling asleep strategies, this is where I would, do a family inventory of sleep habits. I would put together a bedtime routine. And what I would do is I would work on trying to get him to fall asleep on his own, even if it's still with the medicine, because what I'm hearing is, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm hearing that he's tending to fall asleep. Potentially the medicine is kind of kicking in. He's falling asleep, but then you're moving him. And when you move him, and he falls back to sleep, it's kind of setting him up for when he wakes up in the middle of the night, because now he's in a different room, he's in a different place. He had kind of naturally fallen asleep
That
on the
doesn't
couch.
actually seem to bother him too much. When he wakes up, he's perfectly happy where he is, as long as he's not having one of those where he doesn't recognize anything around him. The trouble with moving him prior to him actually drifting off is if we do that, then he gets upset and it escalates, and then he starts resisting the medicine even then, and then he doesn't sleep. So that is our one problem with trying to get him to sleep in his own room, away from everything.
Right, right. That makes sense. So the next step might be to put, with the goal that he learns how to fall asleep in his bed, because then if he wakes up in his bed, and I agree, he's not waking up upset, which is good, but there still may be an element of he wakes up and he's, ready to start his day, and he might stay asleep longer if he learned how to fall asleep in his bed. At least we could test that and try that. Is to come up with some routine that would allow him to fall asleep in his bed. It might mean temporarily whatever you're using to help him fall asleep in the room, like being there for him, It may mean cuddling with him in his bed and then getting out of his bed. But the idea, trying to have him in one place so that, what we'll talk about in a few minutes is this concept of when we wake up, we need the thing that we had. The last thing we had before we went to sleep needs to be there when we wake up. So it may be that having you there, the tricky part is to not have him fall asleep with you in the room, but to at least do his comforting and his falling asleep on his own where he's physically going to be, and then it would keep him, allow him to go back to bed at 3 a.m. We could try that.
We could try that.
Yeah.